Welcome back to Fixing My Faith. I'm Vern Houle. I'll be your host for the next few minutes. So we're discussing a subject here that caught me off guard when I first seen it, how Jehovah's Witnesses' teachings can damage brain development in children. Now, I was a Jehovah's Witness for some 30 years, and I always thought with all the extra Bible reading and Bible study and all that extra Bible stuff that our kids would become more learned. They would learn how to read better, learn how to study better. And they'd be more, I guess we could fool ourselves and think that we're teaching our kids to be smarter, or by going through bound volumes of watchtowers to be more studious. Well, apparently not. So we're going to take a look at this. And I think this is really important information that we're looking at right now because of the series of shootings at Kingdom Halls of Jehovah's Witnesses recently. And this most recent one in Germany has awoken the whole world to really take a close look at the Jehovah's Witness religion. So right now, I'm one of many ex-Jehovah's Witnesses talking about this. We don't see much on the Jehovah's Witness site regarding this, of course, but now we see experts from all over the world getting involved and wanting to know more about this Jehovah's Witness religion. So we're going to talk about that a little bit here. How Jehovah's Witness teachings can damage brain development in your children. So here it is, the introduction. And this fella here that wrote this is Stephen Hassan. Now, I may have pronounced his name wrong, and we're going to go about. And if you go into the about, you can go right to Stephen, the press kit on him. And he spent time in religion. And this gentleman, Stephen, and now if you don't know how to pronounce his name, it's right here.
Stephen Hassan.
Stephen Hassan. So he's a PhD. He has many titles: a PhD, an MA, MED, LMHC, and an NCC. So I don't know what all of those acronyms mean. I myself personally have an RNG. You might have heard of an RNG. If not, if you wait until the very end of the program, I will tell you what an RNG is. And you will find that most ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, most creators, I call them creators, the Watchtower calls us apostates, but most of us we have an RNG. And I'll tell you at the end what that means. It's an acronym. So Stephen Hassan is the fellow that we're talking to. Now, he's got a number of different books that he's written. He come out of religion himself. And so he's educating everyone on this, for his end. Now, here's some of his books. His latest book, The Cult of Trump, is one of his books. So he looks at cults and religions as cults. So there we go. There we got the about. Now, we're going to go back to the article. So we now know that the writer of this article is not the writing committee at the Watchtower. This is a guy who's very educated. He's got a PhD. He's got among a number of other accreditations. And so we're going to read what he has to say. He says, in my decades of work with helping those born into high control groups, the effects are usually quite devastating. Despite the conditions in which young people are raised, I've also seen remarkable courage and resiliency to overcome their childhood trauma, especially if they can receive proper support and counseling. I have blogged before about the trauma caused by corporal punishment. The Watchtower encourages its members to use physical discipline, and it causes grave harm. There are also serious emotional and psychological abuses. I also blogged about a 27-year-old who left her child motherless because she followed the Watchtower indoctrination and refused a blood transfusion. She was trained to believe if she chose to live by accepting medical intervention, she would betray Jehovah, and her entire family and friends in the group would shun and disfellowship her. In my opinion, her indoctrination since birth and the social pressure by her husband and other members interfered with her natural instinct to live and mother her child. I was sent a post on Facebook written by someone who was raised in the Jehovah's Witnesses and who has done a great deal of research. Sam Fade is a pseudonym who is an ex-member who has a great experience in studying abuse in children. I think this article has so much merit, and since Sam does not want to be known and is not directly on the web, I got permission to share it. I decided to put this blog up because ex-JW and counselor Steve Guzek appeared on Dr. Phil briefly, and since this 2016 interview with me, Steve shaved his beard and has lost weight, gotten a promotion at his full-time job. After the show was taped, Steve informed me that he wished to take his life in a new direction. He therefore is no longer working with us at the Freedom of Mind. We wish him the very best in his academic and life pursuits. This episode, entitled My Husband's Religious Beliefs Are Ruining Our Family and Now CPS Has Our Children, Can We Get Them Back? So in the years since my book first came out, I heard from hundreds of ex-witnesses, and former Bethel elder Randy Waters was the first person to teach me how my BITE model fit the Watchtower policies. Please read and share the below article. How Jehovah's Witness Teachings Can Damage Brain Development in Children by Sam Fade. We have established that Jehovah's Witness religion systematically and pathologically disregards the basic human rights of children as laid out in the United Nations Charter on Rights of Child. See articles, Jehovah's Witnesses and the Rights of a Child. I want to address the next topic of how this organization fails and damages children in another way. This is in the way of brain development. A child's formative years are a crucial part of their development. Ask any teacher, scientist, or psychologist. These years form the foundation for who a child will become. During those early years, a person's moral compass is set. Brain pathways are developed, relationships, resilience, community, and a sense of family ties. The list is endless. Interactions throughout these formative years shape the child into the person they will become. Sure, we may grow as adults, but a lot of what shapes us as the person we become transpires through our childhood. What happens in these years is of critical importance. Children from countries that promote early childhood education see a significant return on investment for dollars spent. Nobel laureate James Heckman from the Heckman Equation Organization widely publishes figures and information showing a 13% ROI, return on investment, on an investment in education. Dr. Lynn A. Carley and also Dr. Larry Switchenhart have published findings that the ROI on early childhood learning can be as high as $9 to $12 on every dollar spent. I never really looked at it from that angle. And when we think of Jehovah's Witnesses, we think they discourage the children from going seeking out education. In fact, my own daughter just did homeschooling, and I don't even think she got her GED. So now, when we think of that, he goes on to say, why have I included these figures, and what bearing does it have on Jehovah's Witnesses? What does it have to do with the other children of Jehovah's Witnesses? And how is it linked to brain development? I included the aforementioned statistics to express the importance of early education in the development of who a person becomes. Education plays a key role in a person's contribution to society at large. Scientific studies demonstrate that such outcomes are fundamentally linked. What does this all mean? It means that the information going into a child's brain profoundly affects its development. Likewise, a lack of information or the wrong information may be extremely detrimental. The following will outline how this relates to Jehovah's Witnesses in numerous ways. So first of all, exposure to adversity. American pediatrician Dr. Nadine Burke Harris has been hailed as a pioneer in her field for linking adverse childhood experiences with toxic stress levels, which leads to harmful health outcome later in life. She's an advisory council member. She's an advisory council member for the Hillary Rodham Clinton Foundation Too Small to Fail campaign. She's also the founder and chief executive officer of the Center for Youth Wellness. Her work has been featured in Paul Tufts' book, How Children Succeed, and see also Center for Youth Wellness.org. Exposure to ACEs, and ACE stands for Adverse Childhood Experience. Not only it affects brain development, but it can also affect the hormonal system, immune system, and even the DNA. The more ACEs a child is exposed to, the more likely the risk of developing cancer and heart disease. So ACEs is a bad thing. This is a bad thing to be registered on this chart, and we'll see in a bit here. So it can lead to the affective hormonal system, the immune system, and developing cancer and heart disease. That's what I have, heart disease. I personally took the ACE test and got 6 out of 10. Many others who have left the Jehovah's Witness organization also report a high ACE score. I'll have to do that. Now, adults who are raised as Jehovah's Witnesses end up having a higher ACE score than those of the random sampling of the community. How are we able to recognize this as a fact rather than personal theory? The ACE score test is a tally of exposure to different kinds of abuse, neglect, and other childhood traumas or dysfunction. At the very least, Jehovah's Witness children will always score a 2 on the ACE test. Most, like me, scoring a way higher due to strict corporal punishments, abusive parents, mental illness, sexual abuse, etc. The 2 ACE components that Jehovah's Witness children are always subjected to, sometimes without parental knowledge, are emotional abuse and emotional neglect. Emotional abuse comes in the form of severe indoctrination, restrictions of freedoms, constantly being in the flight or fight mode due to doomsday teachings, restrictions on freedom of identity, and pressure to conform. Again, some of these deprivations of liberty go against the United Nations Charter on Rights of a Child, and these all add up to an emotionally abusive atmosphere. And when you think of it, I never thought of it that way. The kids in a Jehovah's Witness, right from infancy, they're taught that the end's coming, Armageddon's near, everything outside's run by Satan. So imagine what that does to a young mind. I came into the Jehovah's Witness religion when I was 18. So I had 18 years of normal upbringing before I got into that. So let's carry on here. Emotional neglect is the other ACE score with witness children will always have. And yes, so this again is due to the severe adherence to doctrine and to the detriment of the child's identity. Parents are focused on witnessing, meeting attendance, control, and compliance of their child to do exactly what the rules of the organization state. This blind adherence fails children's emotional needs. It doesn't allow them to freely express themselves without fear of repercussion. And there's always that fear of being disfellowshipped for young teenagers that are baptized. I hesitate to put it in the physical abuse, even though it's rampant. It should be noted that parents are encouraged to be physical with their children, and this is a culture within most congregations, and that's true. It is not unusual to see a minor child being dragged to the back of the room for a flogging due to the failure to sit through a meeting. This culture is encouraged through the patriarchal structure and adherence to the doctrine that if you spoil a child, you spoil a child if you do not administer the rod. So, and we see that now in Japan. This is a big thing. Some lawyers are grouping up and taking the Jehovah's Witness to task. We've run an article on that. So now stress in the developing brain. Let's talk about that. Exposure to stress has a profound effect on the developing brain of a child. Now I'm going to get a few of these words wrong, so just bear with me. So, in particular, extremely fearful events affect the areas of learning and emotions. The hippocampus and the amygdala are two main areas of the brain that are affected by stress and trauma. The amygdala determines whether something is threatening, and the hippocampus, which is responsible for your memory, links the fear to its context of the event occurring. This in turn triggers a fear response. The brain releases neuropeptide S, which increases alertness and anxiety. The brains of young children are programmed with the flight, or fright response, and also have a limited capacity to manage overwhelming stress and experiences. Extreme stress can affect the brain development in areas such as self regulation, resilience, and a child's attachment to relationships. The relationships children have with caregivers play a vital role. So, young children under the chronic stress often fail to develop those secure relationships with their caregivers and then do not have the basic sense of trust or security in the world. Jehovah's Witness children are under chronic stress at all stages of their childhood. One of the key doctrines of the religion is that Armageddon is that of Armageddon. Magazines, books, their door to door preaching, online content, and talks from the pulpit are all focused on the impending doom and mass genocide that is coming. Their literature, and this is a mass genocide. We were watching one of the other creators' videos, and really, when you think about it, the kids, we were taught that everything outside of the organization is all going to be eaten by the animals, by the birds, and it's just going to be a mass genocide. And if you imagine, all those images are put into the little kids' minds, or put into the adults' minds. Everyone believes it. And this is what's happening within this religion. So it says that their literature is littered with pictures of this mass genocide, and that's a fact. These pictures are confronting for adults and children. The organization places great importance on emphasizing that this impending doom is coming any day now, or right around the corner, and to live in expectation of it, because we're in the end of the end of the end of the final days. We're just right there. And this is what they're saying right off the stage, right off through the world announcements. The governing body is telling them this all the time. So it says these are all common phrases used in the literature and online videos. So this is a constant stress, and it's not normal. While the fight or flight response, when triggered appropriately, is great, especially in life or death situations. When this is stimulated on a daily occurrence, it makes learning difficult, as the stimulated senses are not those associated with deep learning. I remember I would always fall asleep. My brain would just be rattled, and if I was looking at anything else outside of the watchtower, it would put me to sleep. So I can see that. Where you just feel exhausted some days. We're going to carry on here. It says, for example, you can't learn algebra when you're being chased by a zombie. Children subjected to this chronic heightened senses are adversely affected. This heightened stress reaction short circuits other brain functions like self control. And we think of the shooting, this guy that just lost it, mental illness in Germany. So they lose functions like self control, impulse control, memory, and reasoning. Children then, and I think adults too, obviously, this is happening within adults. So it goes on to say here, the studies about children then do not have the capacity to think for themselves and logically determine their own belief systems. Their brains are short circuited to accept all doctrine pushed in front of them, as they are unable to attain those critical thinking skills that are so necessary in life. This in turn keeps them trapped in the organization. Leavers of the organization often talk about the lack of critical thinking or higher thinking skills. We're going to talk about that next. Lack of critical thinking. When we start breaking it down like this, it starts to make sense. This starts to cause brain damage. I can see it. Now, here we go. As touched on in the previous paragraph, this stress state in a child's brain impairs the critical thinking skills. Again, as an example, it's harder to make smart, well thought out choices when you're being chased by zombies. While this is an exaggerated example, it illustrates the mental fight going on in the brain. Indoctrination is one of the major roadblocks to critical thinking. According to the Association of American Colleges and Universities, teaching students to be skeptical will help them see through the distortions of propaganda and enable them to assess judiciously and persuasiveness of powerful emotional appeals. Dr. Stephen Camarda, PhD, in his article, Emergent Crisis in Critical Thinking, explains that as a society, due to many factors, this is emerging and a common problem. In the Dictionary of Psychology by author Ruber, the dictionary defines critical thinking as a cognitive strategy consisting largely of continual checking and testing of possible solutions to guide one's work. So, looking for flaws or errors and then adjusting your perspective or thinking based on what you learn. This doesn't happen when you are in a part of an organization that believes in indoctrination and blindly doing what it told you. So we can't critical think inside a Jehovah's Witness kingdom home. As an example of the dismal of critical thinking on the part of this organization can be found in its teachings. Consider the next example from the Watchtower, November 15th, 2013, paragraph 17, number 3. At the time, the life-saving direction that we receive from Jehovah's organization may not appear practical from a human standpoint, all of us must be ready to obey any instructions we may receive, whether these appear sound from a strategic or human standpoint or not. You see what this is right in the Watchtower. So they're telling, the Watchtower is telling its followers, even if it doesn't seem sound, you're to believe in the governing body, is what they're saying. Verse 4, and then it goes on here. Now, in this time, this is from the Watchtower, now in this time, for any who may be putting their trust in secular education, material things, or human institutions to adjust their thinking, the elders must stand ready to help any who may now be wavering in their faith. This is quotes right from the Watchtower. Isn't that something, eh? So right there, we know this is a cult. This is a serious, damaging cult. And we'll have on this channel, if you look in the descriptions, I have a petition for Canada. And we're putting this forth to our government here in Canada to stop charity to religions that discriminate, especially to children. So we could use your support if you're Canadian. Now, it goes on to say the elders must be ready to stand by, and this is right from their magazine. So now we're getting back to this article. It says another example is a song straight from their songbook entitled Listen, Obey, and Be Blessed. Numerous more sightings should be listed to reiterate similar sentiments. All doctrine from the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society must be strictly adhered to, and all dissent is apostasy and faces extreme consequences. These consequences again put the stress on a member, which again dissuades critical thinking. And that's the situation that we're put into. We can't talk to any of our family members because we're speaking out. Now, it goes on to say this extreme dismal of critical thinking is encouraged. Straight from their publications, congregants are instructed that no matter how illogical or unpractical, the instruction is, that the congregation must blindly obey. Yeah, and that's true. They want people just to obey the governing body blindly because they are brainwashed into believing that they're God's channel. They're the only channel on earth is the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses. So they blindly obey them. So then people blindly follow along with what they are taught. Congregants are told that critical thinking can cost them their life, and to be a sheep and to follow along meekly. And this is what children are being daily indoctrinated to believe also. And I can attest to that. I was in it for 30 years and I raised my kids in it, and they have a daily text that indoctrinates your family every day of the year. The severe and systematic flaws in this organization are contributing to a culture where children's development is greatly disadvantaged. You can see the failings that have been outlined. The sad thing about this is that most parents raising children in this organization do not realize the damage that they are doing to the development of their children. Parents are being damaged. A lot of Jehovah's Witnesses are also generations in, or born ins, as they call it. So from childhood, they have been disadvantaged also the same way they are now doing to their own children. I do not think that the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society will change the doctrine contributing to this anytime soon, as it will result in congregants leaving or diminished control. Highlighting these issues may help others heal or realize and make changes, stopping the cycle of abuse. This should be a paramount concern to everyone. As the amazing Maya Angelou said, do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better. It is my firm hope that knowledge will give current and former Jehovah's Witnesses the power to do better for the precious children entrusted to them. Very nice article. And for a doctor, it was very easy to read. There wasn't a lot of big words in there. So here's some of the professors, and these guys were born into cults. This guy was born into the moon cult. Professor Allen, influence model. So this would be a site you guys could all go and check out. We'll put a link to this on this broadcast. Freedom of Mind, and they have courses. They've helped a lot of people. If you go to their About Us site, you can see a little bit about them, and they've helped a lot of people coming out of cults, and they've helped them to heal. So we encourage everyone to do the work. I guess we all have the work to do as Jehovah's Witnesses, as ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, and and it came up the About. So it shows their mission. At the Freedom of Mind Resource Center, we believe that everyone deserves the right to build their life free from undue influence. We support those who are affected by undue influence by providing coaching and consulting services, as well as training and educational resources for individuals, families, and professionals. Our team uses the strategic interactive approach, that's the SIA approach, developed by Stephen Hassan, an ethical system-oriented method to enable loved ones to help an individual regain their freedom of mind. And we also provide information to the media to help the public understand undue influence, mind control, in all of its forms, including controlling people, cults, beliefs, estrangement, and parental alienation, so that everyone can have the tools and support they need to protect themselves from undue influences. So they talk about their values, and 192 member countries have signed the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Understood within these fundamental rights is the understanding that each person is unique and has the right to live freely. Now, I don't know a lot about the Jehovah's Witnesses and signing this rights, but I've seen off another creator's channel that the Jehovah's Witnesses have signed with the United Nations. And they tell everyone that they just signed to get a library card, but they brought out you don't need to sign to get a library card. So Jehovah's Witnesses have signed, but yet they're not living in compliance. And I think this is something that we, as activists on the other side of the fence, can bring this information up. So I think this is important, and I think we're going to see more of this coming out as Jehovah's Witnesses, the organization, is being brought to light, and more people are looking in on it especially after all of these shootings in the last few months. It's just bizarre. So it's to the point now where I'm telling anybody out there that's a Jehovah's Witness, don't go out into the meetings no more. Zoom in. If you're going to stay in the organization, zoom in. And I think for when I was talking about Jehovah's Witnesses, I think it's important that if you're a Jehovah's Witness right now, that you look at what's happened in the last 3 months and do some critical thinking and think about this. Is it safe for me to go to the Kingdom Hall with my family any longer? It's going to be better for the planet if you stay at home and zoom in, because now you're not polluting the earth with gasoline. It's going to be cheaper for you. You have the comfort of your own home. You don't have to dress up. You don't have to buy expensive clothes. There's a lot of benefits to being a Christian, what we call a couch Christian. And now we're living in a time of the information age. It's all available. We did this on well, the virus was here. We zoomed in. Works. Now I think we're back at this time where it's not safe to be out in the field ministry. You could be shot. Is the organization providing bulletproof vests for brothers that are out in the service? And if you get shot in the head, a bulletproof vest doesn't work. So I believe the best is abstination. Stay away from the Kingdom Hall. Stay away from the field ministry. Let all the dust settle. See what happens. Zoom in. If you want to do field ministry, you can do it online. There's lots of opportunities online. We have a lot of people, Jehovah's Witnesses, that log into our channels, and they have a lot of nice discussions with a lot of our subscribers, and there's lots of communication. I've asked if they count time, and they don't say whether they do or not, but I know they do. Doesn't matter to us. It's not about time, it's about helping people. So there it is, folks. We're on the other side of the fence, so we're not worrying, but we see all of this, and we're worried for family and friends. So this message goes out to everyone. Really do some critical thinking, really think hard, and really examine this information that we're looking at that's just coming to the fore. And it's just starting. It's going to come out more as this religion is being studied. So that's the end of the program for today. And folks, like always, until next time, keep living your life with love. Love certainly throws out all of this negative stuff, and it really helps us in our day-to-day mental journey of life. Bye for now.